Continuing our series on freedom, I'd like to do a little bit of recap of what I spoke of last week. Last week I spoke on what is true freedom, and I said that true freedom begins in the heart and only exists in Jesus. So if your heart is not transformed, if your heart is not changed, you will never experience true freedom. And if you try to find freedom in everything else but Jesus, you will never find it, you will never succeed, because true freedom exists in the person of Jesus. In this session, I'll be talking on how God delivered the Israelites out of Egypt, yet these people did not experience true freedom. You would think that, man, they saw what God did, how God delivered them out of Egypt. You would think that these people will come out there, sharpened, trusting and following God. But that was not the case, because their hearts were still not changed. So it's like they were taken out of that oppression, hearts not changed, so they just remained the same people as they were. So in looking at this theme, I'll be answering 3 questions. Who were the Israelites? How did they end up in Egypt? And why did they spend 40 years in the desert? Because we see that the journey wasn't supposed to be that long. And in answering this, I want you to keep the theme of trust, trusting in God. So who were the Israelites? We get to read of the word Israel for the first time when Jacob was wrestling with God. So the story of Jacob is just, he stole the blessing of his brother Esau, and then he ran away and he went to go work for Laban for years. And so after years, God was calling him back to the land that he promised his forefathers. So on the way back, obviously home, we remembered that, this is what I did to Esau, so Esau might be coming for my life. And so the one night he was wrestling with God, and God at the end was just like, what do you want? And he was like, I will not leave you or let you go until you bless me, something like that. And so that's where God now changed his name from Jacob to Israel. And so that's where even like the 12 tribes of Israel comes from, because now Jacob had 13 children and 12 sons. So 13 children, of which 12 were sons. So that's where now we get the sons of Israel. So that's how now the nation started. So how did they end up in Egypt? So, now Jacob went back, and remember now he had the sons. One of them was Joseph, right? And the story of how the brothers were jealous of Joseph, and they sold him into slavery, and he ended up in Egypt. And there's just you can read the whole story there towards the last chapters of Genesis. And it ended up that Jacob, who was sold in slavery, became second in command in all of Egypt. See how God can just do the things. Now, how they ended up in Egypt, there was a famine in the land, and the family now heard that, hey, Egypt was doing well, because God was really using Joseph to make the things happen. And so the family then journeyed to Egypt, and that's how they even reconnected. It's a beautiful story, you all should go read about it. And so now they settled in Egypt, because Pharaoh was like, oh, this your family, okay, cool, sharp, they can settle here. So when this king went, there was now a new king. And because now the nation of Israel was growing, because they were now there for years, centuries, he was fearing that this nation might turn against them, or they might even form allies with Egypt's enemies, and they might conquer the Egyptians. So because of that fear, Pharaoh then declared that the Israelites were to become slaves. For years, these people were slaves. They were subject to oppression and just cruel like treatments and all the shebangs. And so they began crying out to God, and God heard their cry. And so that's how now God raised Moses and Aaron to deliver these people out of Egypt. And you know, with the story, like Pharaoh's heart was so hardened that he was not allowing the people to go. And so there was now the whole 10 plague things that happened until now Pharaoh was like, wow, okay, you people can actually go. So that's how God delivered them out of Egypt. It was a miracle, and man, God was showing off his strength, man, and power and might. So now you would think, man, these people have seen, you know, what God has done to deliver them. You would think they would come out there, you know, trusting God and following God and all of that. But that was not the case. Remember, like, God legit had to part the Red Sea for these people to cross over. It's just beautiful what God was doing. And so now, to answer the last question, why did they spend 40 years in the desert? Like, I think that it was probably supposed to take them like 4 days or something, conquer the land and enjoy their land of milk and honey that God promised them. Right? So, well, before now they entered the promised land, they sent 12 spies. So the spies now were from the 12 tribes. So each tribe had to send one person. So these spies went to go spend 40 days in the land now, and then they returned. They brought along fruits now as evidence to show that, wow, this land is really flowing with milk and honey. But then now the 10 spies of the 12, they were like, yeah, the land is really good, but those people are like giants. We are like grasshoppers before them. I just want to read to you all like the report of the spies. It's in Numbers 13 verse 25 to verse 33. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, something, the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who comes from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So, like, these people, because now they heard this bad report, the Israelites were like, nah, like, why did God take us out of Egypt? We could have just stayed there and be slaves, or just let us die in this desert. You know, it was just Joshua and Caleb actually that were like, no, we can do this. You know, it's just like God has called them out, has promised them a good land, But they were just like, no, we are not going to trust God to actually fulfill his plan and purpose. And so that's why I said you must keep this theme of trust in mind. It's like they were not trusting God to give them the victory, yet God is the one that took them out of Egypt. God is the one that did all of those miracles and signs and wonders. Yet these people were like, nah, we could have just stayed in slavery. And so now God was like mad. So the Lord was saying to Moses now in Numbers 14, how long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them. God was ready to wipe out these people, but then Moses, he interceded and for the people, and God being gracious and abounding in love and mercies, he was like, okay, fine. He said, I will do the very things I heard you say. In this desert, your bodies will fall away, every one of you 20 years old or more. Additionally, listen, the 10 men who had given the bad report were struck down and died of a plague before the Lord. So only Joshua and Caleb survived, and only Joshua and Caleb's generation actually were the only ones that entered the promised land, because they are the ones that believed. And so how they now ended up 40 years in the desert was, now remember the spies went to go stay for 40 days in the land now to investigate and stuff. So God was like, for those 40 days, for a day you will stay like a year in this desert. So that's how it came to 40 years. So God was not playing. And God is a man of his word. He keeps true to his word. And so like people, God calls you to this place and whatnot, and you are just like, nah, I've come this far, but wow, God, you're not able to do it. So these people had an issue of trust. And again, as I was saying in the beginning, they saw God deliver them out of Egypt. These people were supposed to experience true freedom. Their hearts were supposed to be changed, but their hearts weren't changed. They didn't have faith in him, and they didn't have trust in God. And that's why these people were not free. They were just still enslaved. So yeah, if God promises you victory, believe in him. If God calls you somewhere to a place, know that he is faithful to keep you, and his grace is sufficient to keep you as well. So if he's calling you somewhere, trust in him. I will share next week on how I'm trusting God at this place where I'm at now, where he has called me. So I'm not gonna be like this Israelites and be like, no, God has told me to leave this and this and bring me to this place. Now I'm just like, God is not able to. Nah, before he struck me dead, not that he'll do it or anything, but I'm just saying. So yeah, stay tuned for next week.